Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Strike here with Alex Beddoes.
Hey, man.
Hey, so we are having, I think it's important to share with everybody because we were just having a talk about the episode, our last episode that we talked to Pablo. We're talking about competitiveness.
Yeah, it's something that every time I'm seeing discussed in the art community, in the broader art community, it's always demonized. And I think it's pretty short-sighted to throw the baby out with the bathwater because, as Pablo alluded to, there's a lot of healthy sides of competitiveness that can help you become better as an artist if you use it well. You know, there's negatives and there's positives when you do things right or wrong. And I mean, I know within my circle of friends, whenever I see somebody post a really cool piece of art, it inspires me to want to, produce art as good as them. And that is a competitive element. It's not me, wanting to one up them or, sort of stand on them or trot them down in order to, make myself look better. It's about, I see somebody do something amazing and I'm inspired and I want to match that and try and be better. It's like, it's not about pushing people down. It's about being inspired and lifting each other up. And Pablo explained this beautifully, and it's just something that every time I see it discussed in public, it's just demonized, and I just find it to be a little bit short-sighted. Like I said, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's positive and there's negatives, as there are with everything in life. So yeah, it was really nice to hear the positive sides of it as well, because I'm a competitive person. I come from a professional sporting background. Like, I am as competitive as it comes, but I'm also, I like to hope anyway, I'm not an awful person to work with. So it's just, it was very nice to hear Pablo talk about that.
So what's the counter argument? The counter argument is that competitiveness and trying to be competitive is wrong because of some other, for what reason?
It can go too far. Like, you don't want to, if you look at sport, you're trying to beat people, and you don't want to beat, like, within your team, you have competitiveness. We're all trying to get the jersey, the starting position in the team. But at the end of the day, we want the team to succeed. We want the whole team to win. Competitiveness can go too far. If you focus too much on winning, and in order to do that, you can, railroad someone else, or you can, tread on other people in order to be this quote winner. And that's negative. That's bad. That's not good. Then people are not, what we sort of highlight as positive competitiveness. That's obviously the negative. And I don't think anyone in the right mind would look at that and say, "Oh no, that is good." But in the same light, there's positive sides to competitiveness, and I just think that side of it doesn't get discussed enough. It's always the bad side of it, because the bad side of it is really easy to draw to. Like, you see toxic people, and like, it's really obvious to draw a comparison and be like, look, that's a bad person, that's bad competitiveness. But the positive side of it is kind of harder to see, or it's a little bit nuanced, so it doesn't get called out as much. Like I said, it's nice. It was very refreshing to see it discussed.
Yeah, it was a great conversation and a great episode, and it's available. Go ahead and listen to it if you haven't already. This one, we talked to Baj Singh. Great conversation with him. Started out talking about building a team, which is something that he has a lot of experience with.
Yeah, Baj is an amazing guy, both artist and as a leader. Like, I've spoken to him in the past about how he cultivates a team, and he says and because I know people who work with him, and he's a great leader within a studio and a company. And he's talking a lot about, because I'm always curious about soft skills. It's something that I'm very passionate about understanding more. And as someone who's actually in a hiring position, the hard skills, the ability to produce artwork, is pretty objective and obvious. Like, I look at portfolio and it's either good art or it's bad art. And like, it's very much, it doesn't take much understanding to get it. But hearing him talk about how in an interview, understanding soft skills, assessing it, and also like how it's not necessarily a deal breaker. If you mess up in an interview, it's not always a deal breaker, and how a studio can help cultivate and bring you along. Because when you join, your hard skills, your ability to produce art is already pretty much there. Like, you have to be pretty good to be working at a game studio. But soft skills, they're sort of come with a lot of time and a lot of experience, and you can't really develop them in your own time. At least it's very difficult. It does give some advice on how you can do this, but you really develop them soft skills and the ability to work as a team in the workplace. And hearing how that happens was super interesting.
Yeah, it was great to have his perspective on that. We also talked about rock stars, getting feedback, receiving feedback, the importance of that, and what exactly means, portfolios, like personal work, professional work, moving into management. There's a lot of topics here. And as you said, Baj, super wise person. Lots of great advice. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one. I think we should just jump right in. So we hope you enjoyed the conversation. Hi, Baj. So great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I don't think we've met before. This is the first time that we're talking. So yeah, it's a pleasure to get to know you. And with technology, and with everyone being at home, we're seeing each other we're seeing more of each other in our homes, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's kind of been nice to actually kind of catch up with people I've never spoken to before, a lot more on Discord and Zoom. I mean, again, obviously miss your colleagues and stuff, which is a shame. But yeah, I've met a lot more people in the last couple of months that I never thought I'd ever meet, or at least meet anytime soon.
What I was excited about talking to you about, and we can jump right in, is your thoughts on building a team, building an art team, and how you go about that, what your priorities are, and what you look for in candidates. And yeah, I'd love to have your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think from my point of view, and I'll always kind of start off with this is my point of view before anyone's like, oh, it's not necessarily the way everyone does it. But for me, it's usually personality-driven teams, and kind of like team fit through soft skills such as communication. Obviously, the work is important, but I think most good hiring managers, especially on the art side, will be able to look at a portfolio and know that person's portfolio is an immediate fit for the team. So the interview stage is probably the most important stage for me. It's the stage where it's like, okay, I know I can figure out what this person's like and whether or not they will kind of work within this and gel within this team dynamic that we already have going on. And again, it's less about the culture of, oh, we look for a specific type of person to fit this team, because our team is fairly diverse. It's more, this person can fit in this team and will be good at communicating with other teams. So it's kind of like a good communicative team player, who again is also, will chat to the team and make sure that they kind of get their points across concisely and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, you get team members who are very good at what they do and they're introverted, and that's fine. But communication skills, at least on my team, are a massive plus. They make up the bulk of most of my team members.
I have got one question, and this is actually aimed. I want to take the opportunity now to I'm going to direct this at both of you, because I think there's a parallel here. But I have seen in the past where we've hired people on potential, and what that potential is, they do not possess all the hard skills. They do not, like, for example, they don't know a particular pipeline, or they don't have a particular set of knowledge. And we're like, no, but we see a potential in them that we can teach them this. I don't see this conversation around soft skills. It's the kind of thing where, like, I think if somebody, for whatever reason, lacks a certain set of soft skills, I don't see much of a conversation there. So this is a question to both of you. Is that the sort of thing that we could apply the same sort of logic to? That, okay, your soft skills, whether that's personality, the way you communicate, all these sorts of things, are not where we want them to be. We can develop this potential on that side of things. Or is it kind of, okay, actually, soft skills is the bare minimum, not necessarily the hard skills? What's your two takes on that?
So that's actually a really good question, an interesting question, because you don't really think about it that way. When you think about training up or skilling up team members, you always think of the hardware side or kind of like the software side, but you never think of how can you kind of communicate with other team members. And that is something that teams could benefit from looking at. In fact, I might write that down and steal that and see if we can apply that to our workplace. But yes, I think there should be an element of how, again, most software can be taught. Like whenever someone says, I know Max, but I don't know Maya, it's like, I don't care. It's like, I can teach you that in a week. That's fine. Obviously, the art skills are different and they take longer to develop, but the soft skills are something that you've kind of grown up with. And I think most people are very similar from childhood to adulthood in the way they've developed those skills. So that's a much harder one to kind of get around with people, but it's definitely something that's worth exploring, I think, because in an interview, that can be one of the things that does let you down. But if you're a good interviewer, you'll know the difference between someone who's nervous and someone who has poor communication skills. You'll be able to tell immediately. It's like, oh, that person was nervous, but I can imagine once they're in the workplace, they'll come out of their shell. So yeah, that's what I think on it anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting what I've seen, and when I reflect on that question as well. It's oftentimes when you're coming out of an interview, if someone doesn't have if someone's lacking a little bit of the hard skills, it's one thing. But if someone is lacking on soft skills, it tends to be a showstopper. And some of it is it's when it's serious, like, oh, the person seems a bit abrasive, or they don't seem to be that engaged, or these kind of things, different from, as you mentioned, being nervous. But it seems like, yeah, a lack or a big alarm bell going off for soft skills tends to be a showstopper and ends the interview, or ends the progress of the person in the pipeline. But hard skills don't seem to have the same effect.
I guess it's also it's just a developing soft skills. I imagine it's internally speaking, like once they're in the workplace, it's a very difficult thing to like tackle, because you're trying to help the person improve, but it's a very personal thing. You're attacking the person. Like, and when I say attack, I don't mean you actually being mean or malicious. It's we're trying to develop that side of you. If I'm saying your hard skills, that's just your knowledge. Like that's an objective thing that you just lack, and we can fix that. If I say to you, your personality needs working on, like, or which communication skills get tied into your personality, whether you're introverted or extroverted. I think it's very easy for people to take that quite personally. If I was to say to someone I'm working with, you're a bit too, how do you pull somebody out of introversion, which is so like, ingrained in us? It's a much slower process. And I guess one side thing to it, you just mentioned the abrasive side of things. I guess the reason you say you draw a line in the sand, like, if someone shows them sort of tendencies, like it's a showstopper, is I guess that's them type of personality traits are like a rotten apple in a barrel. Like they will ruin that can kill teams when you have one rotten apple, like being negative or being abrasive or hurting the team. And now I haven't been in enough teams to see this firsthand, but I imagine both of you with a lot more experience have seen this play out in multiple scenarios, whether externally when you weren't involved, but like bad team members bringing people down. Have you guys experienced that?
Yes, it's a tough one, because speaking from experience, it's a really difficult one to tackle, because I don't think there's any right answer. It's kind of you've got to gauge it by your gut feeling, and I think there's some parameters you could apply. So let's say you've got a younger candidate or a more junior candidate for a position. That person probably is coming in. I think to some point, a lot of us do when we come into the industry for the first time. We're kind of a bit cocky. We've got a bit of an ego. It's like, I've got this interview, I did the exact same thing. Like when I started, that was me. I was super cocky, super egotistical, and I got the wind knocked out of me in like a couple of years to kind of build on that modesty. So I think people can change there. I think it's more difficult if you go for someone who maybe has been in the industry for a while, and you've seen them go to different companies, and then they've got that attitude, and then it's like, okay, you've been around and you've still got this personality, so you've not changed. So you would find it very difficult to acclimatize to the team that we're a part of. But with juniors, I'm much more forgiving. It's hard. You don't want to tell someone. I mean, if someone's obviously abrasive, you want to sit them down and get them to try and understand why they're abrasive. And you can't change someone's personality. You can't. I mean, that's the onus is on them if they have an incredibly negative personality, or that's kind of their trait. But they've still got to fit within the team dynamic, and ultimately they're there to do a job and work with that team. So they've got to put some effort in there to maybe not necessarily change, but to accommodate for the people around them, and accommodate for the setting that they're in. Because I think, there is a professional expectation there, and I don't think that's something that is said enough. Your soft skills matter, absolutely. And it's the thing that I do harp on about. It's the thing that lets teams down, is you'll find that most people within a team are perfectly capable of doing their job if you put them in a bubble. But as soon as they have to speak to other people and communication becomes involved, that's usually where most of the games industry pipeline breaks down. And you'll find that between different disciplines as well. As communication is always, from my point of view, the bottleneck of most game development teams.
Actually, can you just do? I want to just dive into that step further, because there's an analogy I have for this, which is when I used to play rugby. When we lost, the coach would get in the room and he would go, "So what went wrong?" And we'd go, "Communication." And he used to flip his lid. He'd be like, "No, like, what does that mean? Explain to me what went wrong." So could you just do that for me? Because I think this is the exact same thing. It's like, you're right, communication is the big breakdown for people. But I think people don't understand what they hear that word, and I think they associate it with like a buzzword almost. Like, could you explain that just a step further?
Yeah, so I think it's probably easier to do it by example. Let's say you've got a designer who wants a new feature for the game, and they will go to a character artist and go, "Hey, we need this," but they've not spoken to a producer and gone, "Okay, how long is this going to cost?" They've not spoken necessarily to their lead. They've not spoken to, let's say, a new character example. They've not spoken to the audio team. They've not spoken to the animation team. They've just gone straight to a character artist and gone, "Okay, how long is this going to take?" And if that designer is in, say, a leadership position, and they're speaking to a junior character artist, there's some intimidation there because of the hierarchy. So communication is knowing, in that case, is knowing which parties are involved, having a proper conversation, setting up a meeting. It's all of those elements which people kind of have to be trained on. It's not necessarily just the one-on-one talking to each other. It's the bigger scope. I think most teams are quite good, like self-contained teams are quite decent at communication, like a character team or an animation team, at least from my experience. But once it comes to the bigger kind of bubble, and again, on our team, there's like over 100 people. So being able to speak to a member of the tech animation team and ask for a certain rig to be done, and then tell you why it can be done or why it can't be done without you taking it the wrong way, it's that sort of thing. It's about kind of not just speaking to people, not just having an ability to speak to people, but an ability to listen to people and to compromise with people and to take that information and to pass it on to others. You don't have to be, the nicest, happiest, jolliest person in the world. Excuse me. It's like you've got to just be able to convey information from one place to another and make sure that all the relevant parties are involved. And that's more the kind of breakdown. And that was an example of feature creep. Like that is a buzzword in the industry where people will constantly request stuff and then it buffs up the game, and then that just eats into the time that wasn't allocated. So it's just knowing when to speak to people, which people to speak to, and having the confidence to do so. But you don't need to be like the most socially outgoing person in the world. It's just you've got to have that skill set as a minimum.
There's something we had in the old studio, which was understanding people's mental bandwidth as well. Like when a lead person from another department speaks to a junior, for example, being kind of hyper aware. Like if a lead speaks to another lead, they have all the facts and they know all the possibilities. So when they ask for something and they say no, it's like, okay, we understand each other, we get it. I've found in the past, so when I've had teams and someone's spoken to like a junior who I was mentoring, and then it's like, can we do this? They ask the junior if I'm speaking to anybody else. And the junior's like, I don't know, I guess. And they'll go away and they'll forget about it. They won't even think twice about it. They're just asking the question. But then that's on the junior's mind for the whole day. Like, oh, do I need to change task? Should I be doing this? Oh, I don't know what I'm doing now. I'm actually a bit confused. And this is a big thing we pushed in the old studio, which was, understand who you're talking to. And that's not being demeaning. It's just people have things they have to focus on. And there's only so much bandwidth we have in our mental capacity to spend energy on. So if you're going to go bug a junior about something, or somebody who's busy and you haven't gone through the proper communication channels, it leads to things like that where people are not able to concentrate on their tasks. I mean, that's what I noticed in the past studio anyway. There's one other thing as well. And I'm undecided on this. I don't know where I stand because I've heard arguments for, and I've heard arguments against. When you've had that person who has, and this is a hypothetical right now, but you have someone, an absolute rock, they have the most rock star portfolio, they have whatever, how many ship titles on their CV, they are a rock star in terms of their art skills. But they come with baggage, whatever reputation, or that they might be difficult to work with. Is it like what them people, and I know a couple of people like this, and they're aware of it, and they're kind of like, whatever, it's my problem, I can do the art, so it's fine. How do we deal with that in a studio? Because we need these sorts of people. We need these rockstar artists, and they do come with egos. Artists have an egotistical component. Like I said, I'm guilty of it. You said it yourself when you were younger. You had we all have egos. When someone's an absolute rock star and they know they're good, how is it difficult to integrate these sorts of people into teams? Because I've seen it done well and I've seen it done badly. But do then people need to check themselves, or like, is there a limit where you're that good that we're just going to take the baggage with you? Like, is there a limit, or are you like, no, if the attitude isn't right, I don't care how good you are, there's somebody who could do it like 95% as good as you, but they're nice people as well. Is there a line there, or is there no line at all?
I've had this. So we a while ago we were going to hire somebody who wasn't just a rock star; it was the rock star, and we interviewed that person. And the three of us who did interview that person just said the attitude's just not there. Like, you could tell this person would come in and just would not work well with anybody. Like, this person was. I mean, again, I think this attitude just changed the more senior you get into a role as well. As soon as you start to hit that senior level and above, where you have to deal with other people, that influences that decision even more. But from my point of view, no, I couldn't do it. It's like, you're a game development team, and I think it's different if, let's say, you're a contractor. Or you're a freelancer and you outsource, and you might not necessarily mingle with the team every day, but someone who's working internally has to communicate with the team every day, has to go to stand-ups, has to go to meetings, has to make decisions. I can't have somebody on the team whose sole purpose is to make decisions that benefit them and them alone. That's not how my team works.
Yeah, like you mentioned, that it's a team. It's a team effort. It's not a solo effort. And if you had someone like that on the team, you'll lose the rest of your team, and then it'll just be based on one person. And the amount of damage that'll be done, yeah, you won't get anything delivered properly. But as you mentioned, like, if it is a contractor that, like, okay, you have one task, you're doing these type of thing, and you deliver back your deliverable, and there's no interaction with the team, it can be a different story. But
and like I said, I'm undecided on this, so I'm still trying to figure out where the lines are, what I think of this, because is there an idea of, okay, say a rock star artist who obviously is known within the art community, any of them, there's hundreds of them. Is there an element of we can change him? Is it because this is coming back to the original question about soft skills and like developing them? Does that enter your mind when you're like, he or she is really, really good? They're just not, their personality isn't right. Does it enter your mind that, okay, what if we could get them to be a better game dev, and then we get this rock star who's also on board and a team player? Does that enter the mind, or is it like, it's such a hard thing to fix that we may as well just hire someone who's 95% as good and a good person?
Depends on industry experience, I think. It depends on the position and industry experience. As I said, with juniors, associates, trainees, it's much easier because they've got no expectations going into industry. With someone who's been around the block a couple of times, and if they're going for a senior or even a principal position, that person's done their rounds at different companies. That person from experience is probably going to have a personality that they've associated with themselves, and especially if they've been a rock star in teams past, they would come in expecting to be one in this team as well. And it's toxic. It's toxic because, again, it's a team atmosphere. It's different if you're working on portfolio pieces. It's different if you're working as an outsourcer, and like you said, there's minimal engagement with the entire team, and you might be dealing with one team member maybe. But as soon as you're integrated into that team setting, and it's the same with like football, you might have a star striker, but without the rest of the team, it doesn't matter. It's like that team is there not to support the striker. That team is there to work with that striker. And it's like, you don't want to like a hot character artist coming in and going, well, I'm the best, so you all do the retopo for my characters and I just do all the sculpts. It's like, that's not going to work. That's going to lead to 10 other artists who are unhappy. And no matter which way you put it, you're not going to, you might have one really good artist. It's not going to outweigh the 10 others at all. It's like it might outweigh one other, but not an entire team of them. So you've got to just be very wary about how you deal with that person, I think. And like you said, there's a way that it could work if it was more insular and it is a bit more just headphones on, get stuff done, and you're responsible for your own work. But as soon as your team bulks up to a big size and it's a lot more collaborative, it's a very difficult person to introduce to that team.
Does that role realistically exist in a studio? The whole, okay, your one job is to sit in a corner and work. Like I feel like you said, for outsourcers, yes, you are just, there's your task, go do it, produce some work for us. I haven't seen, at least in my experience, in a studio where you could have room for somebody just to be a one-man army in the corner doing their thing because they can't play nice with either boys and girls. Does such a thing exist in a modern day AAA studio?
I honestly couldn't tell you. It doesn't exist in my team and the teams I've been a part of, but I wouldn't want to speak for every team, because I'm sure there are situations. I mean, these people have obviously been employed elsewhere, and maybe it's worked well there, maybe it hasn't. But just from my experience on the projects I've been on, it's far more collaborative.
Is there some experience you could share or advice you could give about giving feedback to people who are struggling with soft skills? Because one of the most important things would be for those people to hear that feedback.
Yeah, I mean, you will find a lot of, when you get the yeah buts, it's like you give feedback to someone, they go, yeah, but. It's like, no, this is the feedback, and you kind of have to take this element of it on board. You have to kind of be direct, because there's no kind of wishy-washy way to deal with people. Well, at least from my fan, there's no wishy-washy way of dealing with it. It's like, okay, it's that point where it's like there is still a hierarchy here. And when it comes to feedback, I generally bullet point it anyway, just to make it clear and concise, and go, it's not necessarily a this is wrong, but more a this is what needs to change. And then I'll explain why it needs to change, rather than saying to the person, this is wrong. Because again, that's not helpful anyway. You should be a bit more constructive, but it's like, this needs to change for this reason. And if you can explain it in a way that makes sense and doesn't feel like you're attacking that person's personality or traits or work, you're usually fine. If that person disagrees, then I'm always happy to hear it. And it's always worth listening to their point of view, because there will be times where I may have provided feedback and then they might have gone, well, actually, I was thinking of this. And then another team member might support them, and then I'll step back and go, okay, you're right, forget it. That does happen. My feedback isn't always final. My feedback is subject to compromise, and discussion, just because, again, makes for a better team. If people feel as though they're part of the process and actively making decisions versus just being told to do something, that means being called out on something, absolutely call me out. It's fine.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it makes me think of what you were mentioning before, Alex, which is communication, which sometimes the conflict is resulting in a communication problem, and sometimes the communication problem is lack of communication, or communicating in the wrong way. So someone will interpret something wrongly because they didn't know the person's intentions or things like this. And sometimes, as you mentioned, you give feedback to somebody, they explain what happened from their point of view, and okay, maybe it actually was a communication problem.
I've given some advice in the past, and what someone said, it comes off as abrasive, and now, as someone who I am aware of, like, I'm a very vocal person. I know what I'm like. If you give feedback and someone says, because I always say understand why, like ask why if you need to, and that's not why as in like in a petulant, why have I got to do this because that's or whatever. It's okay, here's your feedback, and I want to understand why you're giving that feedback. So, for example, I'm an environmental artist, but it's like the composition's wrong, your lines are in the wrong place, and you need to do this. When it's saying why, it's not a why as in why should I, it's a why as in why are them lines wrong? Why is this thing wrong? If someone was to do an interview, that's not them being abrasive. I mean, I guess I know there's a line to tread, like you said, not going but asking why is good, right? You want to see a conversation and a dialogue between you and the people you're speaking to, right?
I think you can reword it in a different way. And it's something that I was chatting to another character I spoke years ago about, like, portfolio reviews and looking at your portfolio or at your work from a third person's perspective. And when they go, can you look at my portfolio? You turn around and go, well, what do you think of it? And then get them to tell you what they think of it, and try and get them to look at it from a detached point of view as you can, because then they start to find the issues in their own work. And then they start to learn from it. And taking feedback is a skill, because you don't take all feedback on board. You've got to learn to go by either law of averages. Law of averages is a really good one. If 3 or 4 people are saying the same thing, it's a very good chance that thing's wrong. But also, subjectivity versus what's objective. And so sometimes I'll look at something, and if I'm not sure, or I'll be like, maybe you could try this, rather than this is wrong. I think saying this is wrong is... You don't want to do that, because, again, that doesn't automatically feel like an attack. It's like, maybe you could try this, or maybe you could try that, and give people sidestep solutions. Because your intention might be to improve the art, but you're not necessarily saying to them, this is wrong, do this, this is wrong, do that. Because, the way I do art is mainly trial and error. I do a lot of art by trial and error, and sometimes stuff might look better if it's done a certain way, and I might be wrong. So I'll be like, yeah, what if you tried this? And it's like, oh yeah, actually this looks cool. Let's go with this. It's working with the person on the feedback rather than it's just completely one-sided. That person fixes it, and then it's like, no, that's still wrong. This is still one-sided. That person fixes it. I mean, again, that's easy to do in a studio setting. That's gotten a lot harder to do with work from home. But in a studio and with contractors, that can be hard to do. So you try and keep it as visual as you can. And for me, like when I'm doing concept art paint overs, I usually do before and after. And I'll do like, this is what you did, and then this is my paint over, and I'll draw an arrow so you can see clearly the difference. It's a bit different there because I think contractors are a bit more detached from their work, because for them it's more of a contract rather than they're part of the final product. But unless you've got a contractor who's worked with you for years, most people just kind of do the work and then move on. But most of I'm not the character art lead anymore, but most of the character art lead will just talk to each other, and they're quite good at just speaking to the person next to them, going, hey, what do you think of this? Can I improve on this? Because they all know what their specialisms are, and they'll all just learn from each other. But I think I've been just quite fortunate to work in fairly collaborative teams.
I just want to say that is the hardest question you get in interviews is, what do you think about your work? Because you're so set up to, you go to an interview wanting to be like peacock and be like, yeah, my work's great, this is what's good and this is what's bad. Whenever I've had that question, and it is I don't think I've met anyone who don't get set in the heels when there's like a pause. You go, so open your portfolio. So what do you think about this? And you go, shit, my script is gone. Your script's gone of all the positive stuff. You have to like go, yeah, what is wrong with this? And if it's so counterintuitive, and I get why people, being on the other side of the table, I see why we do it, because it's a great indication to the person how self-aware they are. But just from experience, that is the most uncomfortable question you can get in interviews, because it always sets you on your heels every time.
We've done it. Yeah. We've done it with character artists coming in and going and asking them what they think. And they've said, oh, if I did this again, I'd do this better. I'd do that better and this better. It's like, oh, you're good at giving yourself feedback. And I think that is quite hard, because a lot of the times with experience, one of the benefits is you learn when something's wrong. You don't always know what it is, but you'll keep drilling away at it or getting feedback, and you'll go, something's not quite right here. I don't know what it is, but it's good to get someone else's opinion on it, especially if you're kind of modest about your work. But again, that just comes with time. I think that I don't think it can be trained out of everyone. I think there will always be some people who will stick with their guns, and they'll never be the problem. But there's ultimately not a ton you can do about that. Like that the onus is on that person. You can try your best and you can recommend ways to go, but you can't change everyone. That is just human nature. It's frivolous. There's no point trying at that point. It's like, okay, you've got to figure it out. You've got to figure out what you need to do and where you need to go, and we can give you advice, but ultimately the onus is on you.
So it's just a shame that you think about it and you just go, oh, if only you could just think a little bit. You're so talented, and I don't know, because you're right, you're 100% right, and it always just makes my heart sink a little bit when I see like people like this, and I'm like, man, you could just humble yourself a little bit. You are literally amazing, like, and you just, yeah, I see it. It's very sad to think about. Just come back to portfolios for a sec, though. When I'm obviously doing ArtStation Learning, very involved in teaching, and there's all the mentorship stuff. I worry about, and I'm mainly coming from an environment art background, but I feel as if we teach juniors bad habits anyway. On some things, there's a lot of stuff we instill in norms within industries and portfolios early on that kind of are bad habits that we have to kind of break as we get older. And I know you're going to testament to this. For example, we have to crunch like hell when we're developing our portfolios. Everyone's racing for it, and it's kind of ingrained to work like this to get to where you want to be. And then like when you're in the industry, we have to then break it. We have to learn to, okay, I don't have to live like this anymore. I can have my own time. And I think there's a lot of stuff like this. So that's just one example of like kind of bad habits which get ingrained at a junior level, which we then spend our careers trying to correct. From a character point of view, is there stuff like that you see, or I guess as an artist in general, that you're having to sort of correct as we get older and more experienced?
So I work a lot. I still work a lot. Obviously, when I moved into a leadership role a couple of years ago, most of the time I was spent doing art at work went, and it was more management, and now it is primarily management with paint overs and things. So I was always doing character art in my spare time. I mean, if you look at my portfolio, most of my work, my personal work, is still on there, and there'd be like a piece or two every year. But I probably put in after work a couple of hours a night, maybe 4 or 5 hours a night, most nights, and then weekends usually all day, unless I'm doing something else. And we had this discussion a while ago on like the kind of overtime stuff, and for me, my work will be the thing that stays at work, but I love just doing art. And I think that there can be a separation there between I have to do this versus I just want to create stuff. And I just want to sit in front of Photoshop and just draw. And now I'm starting to do more 2D. It's like, oh, I want to draw this, or I want to draw that. And I've just got Post-it notes all over my desk of just things I just want to draw or develop. So I think there's a difference between, and this is something, I think it's less the kind of doing art in your spare time, because I think absolutely, if you want to make as much art as you want, go ahead. If that's your hobby and that's your passion, do it. But it's the anxiety behind it. And this is the thing I think that needs to be knocked out, because this is the thing that I always had, at least for like the first 7 or 8 years in industry. In fact, up until recently, strong anxiety of, oh, I've got to keep up. Oh, my portfolio is never going to be good enough. Oh, I've got to, make sure that I get it to the point where I can be employable everywhere. And that's the thing I found that slowed me down, because it became that kind of, it wasn't smart arting at that point. It was just arting through anxiety and trying to do it because I felt as though I had to keep up. And the last kind of year, I've changed that mentality, and not a lot. I still get a bit finicky if like I'm doing art and someone distracts me, or someone's trying to distract me. I'm like, go away, I'm busy. I'm trying to draw, because this is the only chance I get. But that anxiety is gone now, and it's a lot. Once you learn to come to peace with it, and it's just like, you know what? It doesn't matter how much I get done. I'm still working on it. I'm still learning. It might not be a finished piece for a while, but as long as I'm loving doing this, just keep doing it. I think the difference is when you're doing, we chatted about that, the kind of work stuff in your spare time. I think that's different just because that's more on a schedule. But personal work, I am always doing personal work. Even now, I've got Photoshop up on the other screen, and I'll jump back into it later and just go back and crack on with it. But I like it. I mean, there's still that part of me that will feel guilty sometimes, where I'll like turn on the PlayStation or something and be like, oh, why am I playing this game? I should be doing some art, or I should be doing that. But I do set aside time. Like, I'm obviously work from home. There's not a ton we can do, but I go into like, I have like Discord calls with people, and I've started Twitch streaming because I find it helps me focus a bit more. And yeah, even on like a Friday night, I'll just sit with people either on Discord or out in the park and have drinks. So there's definitely relaxation time. But for me, it's like the art, for me personally, doesn't just stop at the office. It's like when I go home, I want to develop my personal skill set because it's a hobby. Like, the stuff I do at work is work. It's there for work reasons. But when I get home, this is my passion, and this is what I still want to develop myself at, because I just love doing it.
Are there times at home when you're doing like work, but it feels like fun? Like it's just something a problem that you want to solve, and that helps with anxiety, but it's doing work?
I spend most of my day in meetings and in spreadsheets, so I'm going to say no. And Excel and like emails and conference calls and stuff. So as art director, yeah, most of my job, I'd say it's more art diplomat. Yeah. It's more like, hey, I've spent most of my time speaking to people and dealing with people and dealing with feedback, and it's less actual art time. I mean, the last character when I was lead character artist, the last character I'd made would have been like 3 years ago at work, and everything was always management side because the team's big. The character team was, I think, at peak was like 25 people, and you've got to spend a lot of time managing that and dealing with people and dealing with all of that stuff that comes with it. I think with smaller teams, it's definitely something I want to look at in my future, is going back to doing something smaller. And maybe I think my most fun project I ever did was the mobile game that we did at CA, and that was like 15 of us. And you've had so much ownership over everything, because it's like, I was the principal character artist, but also I got to do some lighting, and I got to make some props, and I got to do some kind of like post effects, and that for me felt a lot more collaborative. Whereas once you get to a massive team, you kind of feel like a smaller and smaller cog, and then you just you end up dealing with, once you get higher up, you deal with a lot more of the management stuff. So for me, it's like once I finish work, I'll go home and just draw. because it's like I'm developing my 2D skills, and this will transition back into my feedback skills. Like today, I was giving feedback on some creature work, and I was noticing that the stuff I was learning in my personal work was starting to trickle into my work. So yeah, it all ties together. But if I didn't enjoy doing art, I wouldn't do it. I'd find something else to do. It's just I love doing art and developing and learning. And now I've kind of taken on more of a 2D side of things in my spare time. It's like I just want to keep going at it and getting as good as I can whilst maintaining that fun. Because yeah, it's definitely still fun.
I'm not sure which one it is. I want to probably misspeak here. I've been reading up on a lot of the psychoanalysts. I don't know whether it's Jung or Freud, but there's something which literally correlates to this, which is the idea of as a kid, you're full of potential and you have to go on an apprenticeship to narrow yourself down into being something. But then you reach a point and you have to learn to be a kid again and learn to just enjoy and be do open things again. And I feel like that's what it is. What you're describing there is you. As juniors, we narrow ourselves in into this very narrow domain, and we have to focus and go on the apprenticeship. But at some point, you've got to stop being an apprentice and just do art again. I think I spoke to Ryan Kingston about this actually. It was he was saying how he spent his whole career grinding to get better at ZBrush to learn skills, whether it's business or art. And then now in his spare time, he's a ZBrush sculpting. I'll sculpt something. It's not for anything. It's not for work. I'm not trying to learn. I'm just going to sculpt because I want to sculpt. And that's really hard. I found that I'm trying really hard to get to that stage as an artist. I still kind of feel like I need to learn constantly. But when you do have them days where you're I'm just going to make something, I want to make it. It is like a weight off your shoulders. And I think that's the sort of thing I speak to a lot. Any junior artists, I'm you're in the industry now. You've done it. You've made it. Enjoy your time a little bit. Obviously still develop if you want to develop and learn. But don't beat yourself over the head and make your whole career miserable because you think you're having to constantly improve. And it's so hard to it's so ingrained into us. It's really, they think you're crazy when you talk to them. You're you don't need to, if you don't want to learn Houdini, then don't go ZBrush sculpt for a bit. Your job will take care of itself. Your portfolio will take care of itself as well. When you're working in AAA or in gaming every year or however many releases you get, your portfolio gets updated passively anyway. So don't feel you've got this dragon chasing you. But every time you speak to, whenever you say that, they look at you as if you've just, as if it's blasphemy or something. And it's always sad.
I mean, it took a while. It took a long time, and I think the transition to 2D definitely helps because 3D was 3D for me. And I've said this to you before. It's got to the point now where there's so much software and there's so many different tools that I've just gone into old man mode where I'm I don't want to learn how to do fabric in this program and hair in this program. It's I just want to be pure again. And now it's open Photoshop, draw. That's it. And it's a lot more freeing. And that's one of the reasons I kind of went back to 2D because it's I don't have to spend 9 months making a character. I can do one in a week or two. And I've got that idea out of my head onto a canvas. But it's just a lot more freeing. And that mentality changed of I have to do this to keep up to now I just want to do this. And like you said, kids absorb stuff faster. I mean, obviously there's a brain chemistry element there, but also they just don't care about the learning side. They just do it because it's fun. And even when you're playing video games, you pick up skills from video games, not because you have to, but because you're adapting yourself to it and you're not thinking about the process. You're just playing the game. And eventually you just adapt to that process. And it's the same with anything. Once you get into a flow, you just learn it, and it's about keeping that flow up and enjoying it and having fun with it. I mean, I still get low energy. I'll have times where I'm drawing, I'm just I'm tired now, I'm going to go have a nap or something, or go watch telly. But it's I've been doing creature stuff lately. I'd still like projects, so I do like to have stuff that does have a purpose. But I find now that because I'm doing more concept stuff, doing a concept for someone else is nice because then I know that that's going to get used and get modeled, and that's been really motivating to do. But then once I've done one of those, I'll jump off it again and just do loads of little things. I've started doing environment sketches as well, and I've not done environment stuff for ages. Yeah, and it's this is fun. I like this value studies, and I think the thing with art is it just all merges together. That's the great thing about art. No matter which discipline you do, those skills will transfer into another discipline. Not all of them, but I started off as an environment artist, went into character art, but I had those modeling skills that transitioned over. I had some ZBrush skills that transitioned over. So there's always that subset of skills that would jump from discipline to discipline. So it's, if you want to do it, you just do it. I think that it's this. it's going to sound really kind of weird, but the more I've started to just think about my mortality, the more I'm just like, just do it. It's like, oh, I want to do this, do it. What's stopping you? What is really stopping you? Nothing. What, do it then?
Right.
Like, that's it.
Does that translate to advice you might give to a junior about their portfolio? Like, should it be a portfolio full of things that you're just passionate about?
Yeah.
Or something else?
Yeah. First off, most juniors I give portfolio reviews to at like events, they're usually people who don't have a direction. So they usually have a portfolio with just a mix of stuff. And it's like, well, why have you made all of this stuff? And they're like, oh, my teacher told me to, or my lecturer told me to. And it's like, right, first off, no, what do you want to do? It's like, take a Post-it note or, take a notepad and write one sentence that tells me what you want to do. It's like, and if someone writes, I want to be a creature artist at Blizzard, it's like, well, there you go. You've got your final destination. Now work together. Like, that is the hardest part. Everything else is just process and time. But the hardest part is knowing what you want to do, and that can change. There's nothing wrong with it changing. But I think that's mostly the kind of portfolio. I mean, I very rarely give portfolio feedback on like anatomy and like skills on individual characters. It's like maybe things you can improve on next time, but it's mostly on the portfolio. And if I see a portfolio where someone's been having fun with it, it's going to strike out to me a lot more than just, oh, here is generic soldier 01, here is orc 01. And it's like, oh, I've copied this from the same concept as everyone else because, that concept was popular. It's like, no, what do you want to make? Okay, now go make it. Done. It's like, have fun with it because that will lead into your career as well. Like, I think a lot of people try and just break in anywhere. And we've done that. That's fine. But if you're really passionate about the stuff you're working on, it'll just show in your work, and you'll just go into, you'll just find that job will probably be out there somewhere for you, and you will just fall into it because you'll get really good at it really quick. I think you see some like Twitter artists. I think there's a couple of like environment artists and stuff who just have a niche, and it's like, I do hand painted environments really well, and that person has just jumped straight into a career because they do it better than anyone else now because that's just what they focus on. But that's what they love doing.
It's kind of weird, isn't it? Because that's actually main. Whenever I gripe about like education or higher education, it's always the amount of times I speak to students in Discord. I spend most of my free time in Discord anyway, speaking to the community, and it's like, okay, I'm out of education and I want to get into the games industry, and you're right. You look at their portfolio and like, well, okay, I see stylized characters, I see realistic weapons, I see an environment, and I see a couple of materials. Like, what is it you want to be? And it's like, I don't really know. And I'm like, isn't this what your whole early education, higher education, like, is figuring out what you want to be, so that when you leave, you're ready to. That's always been my gripe, is the amount of times I see people come from education and haven't figured out what they want to be. And that's not me slamming the person. That's why I feel like the higher education is all for. It's the academic side of things to help open your eyes to the possibilities and go, right, here's the games industry or the film or creative, whatever it might be. And go, where in here do you feel like you want to be? Rather than do this, and then, okay, you've covered everything. Now go find a job somewhere. And it also, it's like, whenever I hear, oh, I want to work at Blizzard, but there's not much work around. I'm like, by developing a portfolio to where you want to be, any studio could spot skill sets. Like, and I know you're going to be the same. Like, okay, fair enough, you've done a lot of like ZBrush mech stuff, but there's serious ZBrush skills there, and we can use that, and like that skill transitions. But I could see you, because you're interested, you put the effort in, you've put your personality in, and I can appreciate that. I feel like a lot of people get hung up on, okay, people would only hire me if I showcase the exact thing they're after, which is not the case. I know you as an art director, you could probably spot skill sets. You look straight through the artwork, you can see how something's made. Like, and I think students underestimate the artistic eye of people who are hiring them.
Yeah, I think it's like if you were to work on Warhammer, you can still have sci-fi stuff. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. It's like it's execution. It's like if I know you can execute this really well, if you're going to execute a creature really well, you're going to be a creature artist on the team. If I know you can execute humans really well, I know that skill set of modeling a gun will transfer to modeling a sword. It's the same kind of skill set. It's like, it's more about, would you be passionate modeling a sword as opposed to modeling a gun? I think that would be the key factor. And it's like, is this something you would really want to do? And if they were like, actually, I'd much rather do sci-fi gun stuff. And it's like, well, you got an interview here. This might not be what you want to do, but the fact that you got an interview here shows me that you will get an interview somewhere else doing a sci-fi position if you want to. So maybe go for that, because if you're going into that job super passionate about it, it's probably going to be more beneficial for you spending 4 or 5 years of your life at a studio that you want to work for. And you see that with like people doing, like you said, hand painted stuff. Obviously there's some stuff that won't translate. Like if someone's doing World of Warcraft style hand painted textures, there's no normal maps, there's no ZBrush. It's like I just can't hire you because you don't have that skill set for the team. But there are plenty of places out there that do that, not just Blizzard, and you can always work your way to get there. And then, you know, if you decide to change career path later, go ahead and add more tools to your kind of repertoire. Add ZBrush to your process, and you've already got that eye there for color, theory. Especially if you're doing hand painted stuff, that's gonna work in your favor. You've got anatomy skills there because you're doing character stuff still, even if it's super low poly. So it's all transferable skills, and you'll just get better and faster at whatever you transition into.
So there is a line then. Like if we're saying, because I agree, by the way, like, you know, if you've got nothing but hand painted and you show no normal map high poly, like, okay, I can't hire you for a sci-fi, like some high poly sci-fi game. But can you say, and not you say, but you know what I mean, like artistically say that, okay, you have all these hand painted skills, you don't know ZBrush, like I can see you can model, I can see you can make an environment, like model everything, and you have an eye for like, you know, building these spaces out. Okay, we'll teach you ZBrush. How much of a skill gap or knowledge gap is acceptable to you? Like, is a whole software or like part of a pipeline acceptable? Like, if someone's exceptionally good at something else, and I'm talking, you know, like we said, exceptional, like best of the best at this field. You just go, okay, you're really good. You don't know this key thing, but you're that good that if once we teach you this, we see the potential where you could be. Like, is there room for that, do you think? Or do you think, okay, no, you need something there for us to work with?
It entirely depends on the motivation of the candidate and the level of skilling that we need to kind of up you by. Because again, if you're making hand-painted assets, especially when there's so many, you know, ZBrush is already around, this is just an example, then we would have expected you at some point to pick up ZBrush because it's just so common now that to me says you don't want to learn ZBrush, you want to do hand painted stuff. So this company wouldn't be the right fit for you. That's what it would say to me, and that you applying here, you'd be doing yourself a disservice because you wouldn't be doing the stuff you really want to work on. And if your skill set is that good at hand painted stuff, there is a company out there that will be doing hand painted stuff that will pick you up in an instant. But like the training stuff is tough because there's obviously an element of training, but ZBrush is, you know, as an example, versus like Max and Maya, which are fairly similar and ubiquitous. You know, ZBrush is a brand new kind of tool. Learning that normal map pipeline is brand new, and especially if you're working under, let's say you hire someone and deadlines are coming up, and then you've got to skill up that person, and somebody else has got to take time out to really skill up that person to learn. There's all of those variables in there. So I think it's entirely dependent on the situation. I couldn't give you a definite yes or no. It would be, I've really got to gauge this situation, this person's personality, their portfolio, and make a decision based, and of course other candidates, and base a decision on that, rather than I could just give them a snap answer and be like, well, you don't know this, but we can do this anyway. But there'll be instances where we can. And I think it's more like, you know, Max Meyer or Sculptress ZBrush. It's that kind of thing, like where that pipeline knowledge is there, but not necessarily the tools.
I just want to come back to a point you made, because I had this in a private conversation. I haven't spoken to people about this much yet, and I'm curious. So you said, you know, would you be doing yourself a disservice if you've applied here and you have this skill set? You know, would be doing you a disservice because you are, you know, you're clearly not passionate. How much does that weigh on your mind in terms of the interest side of things? Because we had this conversation with some peers. When I say peers, like some of the other studios, but we're friends, and they made a similar point. And I was like, but if they're applying there, like if they're applying to your studio, is that decision already been made? And is it for us as recruit? I'm saying as well, ignore the previous point about like skill gaps, but in terms of their interest, and you're like, okay, you're clearly not interested in X, you're interested in Y. But if they're already applying to your studio, they've kind of made their own mind up and they've applied to you anyway. They clear, you know. And I understand this. I've done it in the past. You know, you shotgun apply everywhere. Like, okay, I need a job. I'll just apply everywhere. How much does it play on your mind there? Because I've had this conversation, and again, this is a fresh thing I've been speaking to with friends about, and I'm not really sure where I stand. It's just an interesting point that, okay, you're not interested, but you've applied here, so you got to be somewhat interested. But is it for me to say what you are or not interested in based on your portfolio? If you have the skills, if the skill set is already there, it's just an interesting point which we spoke about, and I just want to explore that a little bit.
It's tough because there's a very good chance, that person might not even get to interview stage if there's a lot of candidates who would display that skill set. And that is another variable, is there's not just one stage. It's not, look at your portfolio, go straight to interview. It's usually look at a bunch of portfolios, filter them down, get rid of some of the ones that definitely aren't going to make it. Then it would be a Skype interview. Then it would be an in-house interview. So there's multiple steps to those stages. And I'm sure there have probably been candidates where they would have absolutely fit in the team, and we've had to let them go because there were other candidates that, just from the portfolio point of view, were stronger. I mean, I had this recently with concept artist. I had a trainee concept artist, and I had 3 really strong candidates, and one of them just edged the other 2 out, and that was one of the hardest decisions I've had to make for quite some time. But it was a decision that ultimately I had to make, and someone had to get that role. But yeah, I guess it depends on the way you handle it, and feedback is good. I know you get a lot of people who say, I don't get feedback, and the reason why, for the most part, is because we get so many people who apply, and I cannot physically give feedback on every single one. I've got a million other things to do in my day job. That's why we've started to do more things like portfolio streams, so people can get a general feel as to what their portfolio should look like. We did one the other week, and we're going to do another one next month. And I think for those candidates I had for the concept art role, because I knew 2 of them, I phoned them up after I made my decision, let them know, hey, sorry, you didn't get the role, but keep going because you're amazing and you're really good at what you do. You just missed out. And that there's a bit of courtesy there, but again, 3 people versus hundreds. It's like it's a much easier process. So when people go, I didn't get feedback, it's like, it's not that we didn't want to give you feedback. It's just too many candidates. Just don't have time. Sorry.
I'd like to get your opinion on something, because before, as you were talking about your day job and what you do during the day, and then what you like to do at night because you're an artist, there's some artists that really like doing art, and they want to continue doing it. Others, like you, made the decision to move to more management and art direction and not doing art during the day. So why did you make that switch, knowing that you're so passionate about making art? And second, what would you say to artists that want to continue doing art, want to be getting more senior, and but don't want to go to management?
Okay, I'd say for me personally, that I kind of slipped into the lead position. I think we were at a point where we needed someone to help manage the team because the team was just getting big, and I kind of slid into that position and then just went with it. So that initial lead position was kind of like built out of necessity rather than this is something I definitely want to pursue. I think I probably also fell into that trap of seeing it as progression, and that can be a trap for people, because I think there's a hierarchy, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's progression. I think a lot more studios now are dealing with principal positions, and again, so just to go back to what I was originally saying, I went to art director because I realized I was actually quite good at managing, and so I wanted more exposure to that side and to see more outside of just managing the character art team, and to have a bit more say in decisions. I don't know if you've noticed, I'm a very mouthy person, and I'm very opinionated. So when I walk into a meeting, I like to just be like, yeah, do this, let's do that. And I want to know what's going on, because I don't like it when people make decisions and don't tell me. And so I was like, right, I'm going to be an art director so I can be making those decisions and making sure that I know exactly what's going on. But regarding progression, a lot more studios now are starting to do principal roles. So I think some people have an expectation of, we've been at this studio for this X amount of time, I should be a senior. And from my point of view, once you start to encroach into senior and principal, then you start to you go from just doing the work to doing the work and starting to mentor your peers more. And then once you move, and you can either go down 2 routes, you can either go down the expert path, which is principal, and then you're just like, you probably should be the best on that team, and mentor and taking that skill set and passing it on to the rest of your team members. Or you go down the leadership route, and that's like, okay, you're definitely not the best artist, because you've got to make sure that every other artist under you is as good at their job as they can be. And I think there's always confusion. I think people think, I'm getting older, or a lead is something to aspire to. It's like, if you don't want to manage a team, don't be a lead. go into, unless that lead role is maybe in a small studio where that you'll be doing a lot more art, and that's different because I think the titles get blurred there. And again, it's a title. Like what that job defines you as will ultimately depend on the company, because you see a lot of like indie studios or smaller studios where art lead is essentially art director. Artists, 3D artists will deal with character art and environment art. It's entirely dependent on the studio. But from my personal experience, once you hit the principal versus the expert path versus leadership path, I think you can think of it like that rather than necessarily principal and lead. You've got to make a decision as to which route you want to go down. And some people do make good managers, but again, some people do the leadership path for a bit and then decide they don't want to do it anymore, and they go back to becoming a senior. Like that happens quite frequently. It's not for everyone. But it's for me. It's like, and again, one of the reasons I went to 2D is once I became art director, I realized I wanted to let character art go as my entire career, and now focus on being more what I expect from an art director, which is good at 2D, good at explaining themselves within 2D paint overs, within illustrations, mood boards, all that sort of stuff, and being able to deal with that a lot more. So that's kind of what I'm building on in my spare time. But also, I just enjoy doing it anyway. But yeah, I think progression's a tough one. I definitely don't think you should get promoted based on how long you've been at a studio. I don't think that's a definite no for me. I think it's more what you put in. And again, that's not an overtime thing. That's more of a, I can see you're spending time mentoring people. You're spending a lot more time communicating where you don't necessarily have to. You're kind of showing some leadership qualities without necessarily going into a leadership role, and mentorship qualities. And so that way I'd be like, yeah, you're definitely of a senior position. You might still have a regular developer who, in terms of skill set or workload, is of equal quality, but you've expanded your skill set rather than just driven home and got really good at this one thing. You've expanded your skill set a bit more to take on that additional responsibility. And I mean, at our place for the character art team, for example, we've got a lot of seniors who deal with outsource. So they will have one outsource contract character artist assigned to them specifically, and they will provide feedback for them, and they will handle their work when it comes in. And I'm very hands off with that. I'll just let them deal with it and trust them with that element of responsibility, or rather the lead role, because I'm not the lead anymore. But yeah.
Yeah, as you're mentioning, taking on additional responsibility a lot, and it doesn't come with a title as well. Title is just a title, but the best cases are when people on the team are taking on those different roles just naturally, and it's coming like that. And then when it comes time for them to be promoted or get other positions, everyone around them is like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That person's already been doing that. Like, makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, you do find people who do go, well, why aren't I promoted? It's like, well, you're really good at what you do, but your Perforce file structures suck, and you don't speak to anyone else. I don't say like that. But in my back of my head, I'm like, you can't name anything properly. What's going on? And it does happen. You'll get some people where it's like you're just, But if you show me you can do this, and I've had this in one-to-one stuff. If you show me you could do this, and you show me you could do that, and then we'll consider you for it. And they will take on that attitude, and now they are working towards a senior title because they are taking on more responsibility. Like they're doing the kind of mentorship stuff, and they're doing good at it. I think it's just, it's putting in that extra effort there to go, hey, I'm always happy to listen to someone tell me, oh, this is what I aspire to, and I'll tell them exactly what they need to do to get to that position. And then we'll work on it together and try and hit those points to get them to being of a senior level. Although most of the time they do it on their own anyway. Most of the time it's kind of like, because they're quite the team's very social and the team's very chatty and very just outgoing. So they'll all just chat to each other and go out of their way to do stuff. And I think we had a trainee who just blitzed through everything. Again, she wasn't the best artist necessarily, but in terms of communication skills, absolutely golden. Like I could just let her get on with it, and she's working her way to senior level without any help from me. It's just doing absolutely fine on her own.
Fantastic. Well, it's been great chatting with you, Baj. I've enjoyed the conversation and a lot of stuff to learn there about leading teams and finding your passion. People can find you on your ArtStation page. Of course, you have your portfolio there, lots of great artwork, or follow you on Twitter. Also Twitch, just taking some time to watch some of your Twitch streams. We want to talk a little bit about that because that's something that you just started not too long ago.
Yeah. For me, it's something to help me focus, because one of the downsides of being a manager is multitasking. And as you start doing more multitasking, you find it very difficult to focus on one task at a time. So having myself broadcast me work makes me focus, because I'm doing it for an audience. And the last thing I want to do is step away from the work and start playing around on Facebook or start playing around on Twitter or doing something else. It's no, there's an expectation here for me to work and answer questions when they come in. And I keep it quite casual. Because again, I want it to be quite chill. I don't want people to come in and feel intimidated or anything. It's no, come in, say hello, ask some questions. I'm always happy to answer them. Obviously, as long as they're not work related and it's just more kind of casual stuff or what I'm doing or how I deal with a certain problem, feel free.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Baj. Thanks again.
Yep, no worries. All good.
See you on ArtStation.com, the global hub for creative professionals. You've been listening to the ArtStation Podcast. Hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And please leave a rating and review for the podcast. We promise we'll read them all. See you next time.